Okay, so for week 3, I just finished going through the content that I have recorded before and did a code along of myself, which is very meta, if you know that term. It was kind of interesting to listen to myself and remember how I phrase things and realizing that, you know, even as of just a year ago when this content that you're about to go through was created, I can already see how much I've grown in just a year. So it's kind of cool, but I also thought, you know, there's a lot of content that gets covered this week. So I thought I'd just do a little mini pre-learn concepts that we cover this week. And I'll end with talking about why it's so important to ask for help. All right, so I actually want you to code along with me. So what you want to do is have whatever, whether it's your code space or whether it's your local development environment, and have the public open. Okay, so public at this point, you've done week 1 and week 2. I finished week 3, but go back to week 1. Open up your index file, look at that, open up your main, look at that, okay? So a couple things we've already updated in our skill sets for this. And the first one is here in the script. And even before I say it, I'm curious. And this is where you want to see how well am I grasping these concepts. I need to put defer here, and the question is why, okay? Why do I need to put defer there? And the answer is because of where I'm loading the script, my JavaScript may need something to already be rendered, and because this is rendered by the browser in sequence, if I don't defer it, my JavaScript may be trying to, because it's loading it here, it may be trying to access something that's not available to it. So if I defer it, I handle that. Now the other way we've shown is to put it at the end of the body. So there's various thinking about that. Okay, now on main. Okay, so we know that it looks good, but we can always check it. And going over to main, couple of things. I've already talked about the idea of using quotes, double versus single. Okay. I talked about the importance of having the semicolon at the end, right? So we've talked about also, so actually, I guess this very beginning is not so much a pre-learn, but a review, okay? And then we'll get into the new stuff. So while I'm in the browser, to see if my files are set up correctly, I would hit Go Live. And in my Go Live, it would show me a list of my directories that, remember, this URL is only for the local, not for where you share out on the discussions. But in this case, I'm going to go to week 1, and it says Hello World there. Now, what is creating, this is a little test for you, what's creating this content? Is it JavaScript or is it just in the browser? Okay? And the answer is it's in the HTML, which means it's really hard-coded. This is a term, hard-coded into the HTML that shows up in the browser. Okay? So in this case, I could get rid of it, and maybe what I'll do, and you want to do along, is week, right? Pre-learn week 3. Okay? Okay, so now, because the reason I know that is that it's here, also the reason I know that is even though console.log showed up in my JS, I can know by this point that the only thing console.log does is outputs to the console. So going back over here, I don't see that console unless I come down. I drop into my dev tools. For me, it's Chrome. I have the way I have my browser set up, or my dev tools set up, is I get a list of all these options at the top. I'd want to go to source, click on my JS file, but also I get this nice console, which is where the console.log is running. Okay, now a little preview is that actually in this case the console.log itself is built in to JavaScript, but it is a function. We're going to learn about functions this week. So we're passing that hello from inside the main.js file. Okay, so as soon as we do that, then we see that run. Okay, so this week in week 2 we learned about variables and about the different ways to declare it. I also gave you a rule. You definitely want to follow that rule whenever possible about when to use const and when to use let. When to use const or let, and don't use var. And the answer is use const wherever possible unless you can't. Okay, so this week we learned about how the operating system, the JavaScript, and the browser, because they all work together to run your code and to do particular things. And I'll say something like, and you do along, my var, okay, equals. Okay, so I'm telling it, this is my declaration, and this is my assignment. Okay, and in this case, let's say I'm going to use a string, right? My var is, in this case, the string is just my name. Okay, now I can obviously put anything I want in there. Okay, so if I come over here, right, I see this now in if I look at sources, and you definitely want to get used to this, right? But I don't see anything on the console because I didn't do anything with that. Okay, but what I want you to start understanding is the idea of that JavaScript is what we call dynamically typed. Okay, so in this case, it doesn't matter if I do a string, a number. Okay, my var could be a number. So if you've ever dealt with any other programming language, you've learned that often you have to tell it what kind of data is going to be stored in that variable. But JavaScript is dynamically, or what we call weak typed. It doesn't care. There's benefits to all these things. Okay. And one of the things you'll see this week is if I don't assign, because I'm using the const, if I wanted to set up a variable, okay, like this, I'd have to actually, in this case, just use let. Okay, because if I use const, I actually have to not only declare it, which is I'm doing here, but I need to assign it a value in order to use that. Okay, so we'll just leave this in place for right now. So the thing also you're going to learn this week is actually, and we're going to set up another variable called my var type. Okay, so this is the camel case way of setting up writing a variable. And the nice thing is you can kind of break it into pieces. The var, next word is first letter is capitalized, so camel case. And so in this case, equal is the assignment, right? And now we're going to actually run a new command that you're going to learn this week. Okay, and it's called type of. Right? And so what is type of, and in this case we pass in my var. So again, we've seen this in console, we've seen it now here, and what we're doing is calling something that you didn't write that was built into, in this case, the JavaScript environment that runs code that returns a value to us that is then stored in here. Okay, and this is a common pattern. So what we could do here is we could do console.log, okay, and we could just say, hey, show me what is my var type, right? So we declared it, right? We didn't assign it. We said, hey, store whatever's the type, whatever the data type is in there, because one of the things we'll learn, and I'm just kind of previewing this a little bit, and I popped over to my dev tools. So in this case, because we set up the variable, but we didn't give it a value, it is undefined, okay? So if we were to go back, right, and let's say for a minute, I'm just going to comment this out and leave it, and I'm going to do, how about const my var equal, let's go back to my name. Okay. Oh, yeah, and the idea of using semicolons. I've been playing with the idea of automatic semicolon injection, and it doesn't work as well as I'd like it to. So I'm just going to get used to writing it. So if I come down here, so now I've commented this out. I've added another variable. Okay, I've declared and assigned. This is the assigned. Right? I've given it a string value. I've asked, hey, what type is it? And here I've outputted that. Okay, I'll say console log, tell me what that is. So it's a string, which is, in this case, the undefined that we saw before, and string and number and object and null and symbol, right? These are all things that are stored as primitives. These are primitive values. But in JavaScript, the most common primitive is an object, which we will learn about later. So let's come back over here, right? My var this time, right? I'm just going to show you, right? So if we do 42, right? So now it's a number, okay? Okay, so now that you're going to learn more about that this week, and you'll also learn more about this idea of how when we output content to the console and in the future to the browser, we can do it kind of the old way or the new way, right? So the old way is kind of using these double quotes and then doing plus, and and in this case we're going to concatenate. We're going to, in this case, not add as the operator, but in a sense we're putting it all together. So now I could say, hey, my var type. Now what I'm doing here is I'm creating a string, and in here I'm just saying actually output my var type. Okay, so now this is kind of the old way. So if I was to hit copy and paste, and then now I did backticks. Okay, so now when I do backticks, I no longer have to worry about spaces, which actually I'll show you. I didn't even show you that here. I'm hitting a back or including a backspace at the beginning and the end. But where I want to inject the variable, I would do $, okay, curlies, and then curlies. So this is the old way, this is the new way. This is called template strings. So let's actually go look at the difference here. Okay, so here's the two lines, and you can see that, hey, how come it's just kind of mashed those together? Because it used this idea of concatenation. So whatever you put inside of here literally is what got output to the console. So if I want that space, I actually have to manually put it in versus a more natural way. Okay? Okay, so those are concepts that you're going to learn this in kind of the beginning of this. And then we'll start talking about, right? Oh, by the way, let me just go ahead and just show you null. Okay? Oh, that's right. See, and this happened in the video and it threw me off because when I said type of, I would have thought, because null is basically, there's nothing in there, but it is declared. So it's one of those, what does that mean, right? Probably a better example, since we don't use null a lot in a class like this, is what I showed before. Or I could do also like minus, like I could do negative numbers, because negative numbers are still just numbers, okay? All right, so now what I wanted to talk about is, the if, right? Because if some condition, okay, if some condition, and the condition resolves to true or false. So if we just start with what it actually evaluates to, and I'll show you what I mean by if something is true, right, then console.log, and I'm going to use template strings, this line will run, okay? Else, and we'll talk about this syntax in a minute, right? This line will not run, okay? In this way of writing it, because what you're saying is if true, okay? If something's true. Now, in this case, we know because we're actually hard coding a now, by the way, what kind of data type is this? And I didn't even talk about it here, so maybe we could do that now. This is actually called a Boolean. Okay, so let's actually see this in action. Okay, so this is a Boolean. It's another type of data primitive. The way we store it is in its primitive value. Okay, but when we write logic, when we say, and this is how we make decisions in code, if something is true, then run this line, right? Else, meaning this is false, then run this line. But also notice what the browser is trying to help you with. Check this out, because look what happens when I type false. Did you see it? Did you see? Oh, yeah, how about that? This line then becomes a little faded. And the reason that's true is that the editor is trying to tell you, hey, based on the way you've written this code, this line will never run because it's false. Okay? So and watch for that when you're writing code. Okay? So now what I was talking about is it resolves to. Okay, so if some condition, and in this case we're using the primitive value of true, and I used primitive value of false before, then run this, and this is a code block. Okay, this code block represents one or more JavaScript expressions. Okay, and expressions are JavaScript commands that work together to accomplish some kind of action that you want to take, or some kind of storage, or various things. We can almost think of it as input and output, like in general. Like this is an output expression, right? This is a storage expression. You don't have to know that piece. More than anything, understand that what you're going to learn this week is the idea of logic, and how to, and that's where we'll go now, is how to do comparison. Okay, so in this case, this is like, we know, hopefully by now, just the little bit I've talked about it, you get the idea of true or false, because these are primitive values. But most of the time what we're doing, almost all the time what we're doing, is actually doing some kind of evaluation to determine if that thing is true or false. So as an example, let's go back up here. Okay, and put 42. And now we know that that data type, that primitive, is number. Okay, so now we could say, and now we know that data type, this number, is stored in my, and by the way, if you want to go back, you can see it here. Okay, and this is now, giving us, because of this. But now we can do this. Now we can say, if my var type. And now here's something, it's an operator, it's called triple equal, it's called strictly equals. So does whatever is in here, equal? And because it can get very confusing in JavaScript to know the difference between assigning something and asking if something is equal. Because in your mind, this kind of is it equal when you're trying to write it. But in JavaScript, the triple equals is generally the way, although you can do a double. In general, for the beginning, just do a triple and you'll be safe, because it's saying not only are the values, but are the data types also equal. So what would we be doing here? Would we be saying if data type equal to, would we be doing number? Okay, let's go see. And in this case, it throws an error. Okay, and you might go, well, why? We know data type is an error. Or we know that number is the data type based on what we gave it. So why wouldn't that resolve? And the reason is that comes back as a string. So what we need to do is actually ask, okay? Yeah, So this is where you learn that when you call type of, it returns a value. Now it tells us what kind of data is in there, but the type of data that gets returned is actually, in this case, a string. So we have to ask, hey, when I want to know, is it equal to a returned value from calling my type of? So if we were doing string, which line would run now? Just think about it, We know our data type is what? Number. So when it hits this resolves to what? False. So this line will not run. Oh, okay, sorry. Actually, this line will run. So actually, I need to get my string right. Will not run. In this situation, because now we could actually write more complex stuff. So I'm going to show you actually how to see this. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to set a breakpoint right here, because I want to show you the idea of what it resolves to. So when I hit refresh, and again, you really need to be learning about this concept of how to use DevTools, because it's so helpful, and I'm about to show you how. So right now we're on this line, we're getting ready to evaluate it. If I hit step, it actually does evaluate it, because this line is just saying, hey, I'm getting ready to execute this line, so let's go ahead and execute it. And so now it shows you, hey, it showed you based on the way it's written where the control was handed off to, but what it didn't show you in this sense is why, unless you can just read it. But if you don't, and it's just good to know, let's say I select. And can you see that? I'm going to show you another way to look at it. So what it did is it evaluated this expression, and I'm going to copy that for a second, and I'm going to come down here, I'm going to paste it into the terminal. So I can say, because when JavaScript evaluates that line, it says, hey, or that expression, it says, hey, is whatever stored in the variable my var type, is it triple equal to string? Okay, and in this case, not, yes, it is strictly equal. That means it's return data type from here, and this is where it can get a little confusing, because it's like, well, wait a minute, it was before it was actually just returning to tell me a string, or when I had a number, because what would happen now if I did number? Now you might wonder, Rio, why are you typing inside of DevTools? Because sometimes it gets a little confusing about where you're at, right? I really should have done it over here. Okay. Because now, without looking at DevTools, right, which is, let's go back here, which line will run? And I should say that, right? Well, this one run, right? So which of these lines will run? Will, I don't know, something like that. We could play with that. You could play with that, actually. And this is where actually playing with code is really good, because the more you play around with code, notice how I copied in the backticks in that case. Well, this 2. And actually, we could even put the line numbers. We could actually say 11, or we could say 13. That'd be another way fun to do it. Okay, so without me running it, which line will run? Because we're saying is data type equal number. We know that that's true here. Okay. Oh, let's go ahead and by the way, it's pause, so I'm going to run. Right. I'm going to let, and this is where I could step into. But look at this. I can also roll my mouse over my var type. Okay. Now, again, this is preview. Last thing I'm going to show you is the idea of a function. Okay? Run now. I'm going to give it a function. Okay? This is just the syntax. Don't worry too much about it. We'll talk more about it. This is the last thing you'll end up learning this week. Is we want to something, you know, console.log. We'll do inside the function. Okay? Right? So when we set up a function, it's really the idea of having multiple JavaScript statements that we run and that do some type of work. Okay, and we can pass things into a function where we can turn things back. That we'll kind of touch on at the end of the week. So in this case, the way I've written it here, will this line run, right? And the answer is, and let's just go ahead and run it through. And all I did was hit run twice there, and I hit, because you have the option over here, is the function itself. Now the breakpoint is there, but it's actually past the breakpoint. I've already let it run. And so notice that this console log didn't, because in order to actually call invoke, you actually have to do run now with the parentheses. Okay. Now this is not a great example, so let's take this code, right? Put it in here. And now, anytime we run this, okay, we call this, it runs it. So we could do it multiple times. Okay. And now you'll learn, starting next week, how, and notice, look, this, so right here, so we ran it the first time, and notice how it actually shows you, so it actually shows you here which line in the code did the output to the console, okay, which is totally awesome. So what we could do here, so we could go up and change this to string, okay, all right, okay, play around with this code. The last thing I'm going to say, and I know this ran a little bit long, But again, it really helps to preview learning. And even if you didn't get it all, if you got a little bit of it, when you go to do some of these things this week, I hope that this was helpful. You tell me if it is and if you want me to do more content like this. Now, why is it so important to ask for help, right? Because in life, we often need it. I mean, I need it, right? We all need it in different areas of our lives. For coding, I absolutely talk to people that know more about coding than I do, because when I talk to them, I learn a ton. And part of it is just learning to reach out. So it is so important. Okay, so in your reply, last thing I will do, I meant to do this before, is I will go ahead and do git add star, git commit -m. Week 3 attendance. You'll do this as well. Remember, not until I do git push does it show up. Okay, there you go. So then what you want to do is go out to GitHub 93, go out to your public repo, wherever that's at, right? Go to your week 1, right? Commit history. Cool. Now, actually, at this point, because we have the URL, you could actually use the URL to show us your code. So if you can give me this link if you want, but if you remember, you can also go over here to pages and give me the one that actually renders as, like if I come here, actually, let's just do this one, okay? W1. This goes back to the pre-learning on week 3. All right, again, was this helpful? How much of this did you get? Maybe and maybe you could tell me at the end of the week as well, like, this is something you would like me to do more of, or would you want me to slow down? I'm cool with either. All right, we'll talk more about functions in week 4. Hope you have fun.